War Against All from Immortal, more like Bore Against All from Immortal. Ayo! Kabam! Bazing! Bada bing, bada boom! Catchphrase! Alright! Okay, god damn it. Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from Immortal entitled War Against All. This is the 10th full-length studio album from these Norwegian black metal icons. The last few years have been interesting, challenging, shall we say, for Immortal, for the Immortal fan base, as every member of the band has been continuously locked within bitter legal disputes over who specifically owns the name Immortal, over who specifically owns the trademark and the music. As many of you may already know, this forced the band's iconic frontman and guitarist Abath to leave the band back in March 2015. What you might not know is that it also forced the band's drummer, Harg, to leave the band sometime within the past year or so. I mean, it's not entirely clear what exactly happened, but officially speaking, Demonaz is now listed as the only member of Immortal, and as such is the driving creative force of the band, and in turn now this album. And that's a problem, in my opinion, for a number of reasons. For one, this Immortal is decidedly a lot more serious and cold and dark and icy and grim, which I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate. But, you know, there was a certain charm and whimsy that Abath brought to Immortal that has been gone for a while, and it is very sorely missed on this record, in my opinion. To be blunt, the vibes are off. It's also very clear to me that Demonaz is not interested in any kind of outside thinking or collaboration of any kind, because the incredibly talented people that he hired as session musicians are given very, 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 very little to do. And to be honest, probably could have been switched out for any amateur black metal musician, and you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. I feel bad for Arv Isdal of Enslaved fame especially, because he's a great guitarist, a very creative and a very cool guitarist who has worked on some of Enslaved's most ambitious records. And here he's just playing bass, and his bass is actually buried pretty far back in the album's final mix. This all kind of reads to me as someone who felt as if he was working and living in the shadow of his peers and contemporaries, and now that Immortal is his to completely control and to do whatever the fuck he wants with, you know, he's gonna make sure that everyone knows he's in charge. Doesn't matter what you did before, what you're capable of. If he tells you to play bass, and if he tells you, hey, you're getting fucked in the mix, that's how it is. End of story. One could argue that there is a boldness and a confidence to this. Sure, maybe, hypothetically, but to me it reads as ego and insecurity, especially when we get to like a self-titled track like Immortal. Yeah, you heard me correctly, folks. On an album called War Against All, which arrives in the wake of Demonaz winning these legal disputes and owning Immortal forever legally, there's now a self-titled Immortal track. Wow. We probably wouldn't even really be talking about all this, at least not in this exact manner, if War Against All were a fucking kick-ass collection of blackened metal tunery, but it isn't. It's stale, it's repetitive, it's predictable. It doesn't really have a single original idea or concept in its brain. And at times, I can't help but feel as if Demonaz is just looking at older Immortal records and going, alright, but what if I made this lamer? Like, it has all of the things that you would expect from an Immortal record, but there's no urgency to it whatsoever, and the songs themselves just aren't interesting. Nordlandier, for instance, is an incredibly aimless, outright boring instrumental black metal number with no variations in riff, percussion, time signature, mood. It just repeats the same one section, the same riffage over and over and over again. It's the sonic equivalent to continuously reheating an old piece of meat in the microwave. Similarly, War God feels half-baked and unfinished. There are some heavier, almost Immolation or Morbid Angel-esque riffs and beats underneath the frosty soundscapes, which I'm kind of digging, but this never really evolves or blossoms into anything really that substantial or memorable. It just kind of repeats itself until the track eventually runs out of steam and comes to a close. The same can be said for the album's title track, War Against All. Definitely one of the most repetitive cuts on the record. I would argue repetitive to the point of being slightly irritating, especially as Demonaz so frequently shrieks out War Against All over and over and over again, with the same riffs, the same beats, the same everything. It doesn't help either that the following track, Thunders of Darkness, follows an almost identical structure to the point where I genuinely thought I was still listening to War Against All up until the chorus for Thunders of Darkness kicked in, and I realized, holy shit, these are two different songs. Ultimately, this album feels like a recreation of Immortal's more generic moments from the 90s, but worse. Like, it definitely feels and looks like old school Immortal, but it just doesn't have the same impact. And this is coming from somebody who, quite frankly, was never the biggest fan of Immortal to begin with. But I would honestly rather listen to those early records, you know, Pure Holocaust, At the Heart of Winter, over this. Because I think there's just a lot more personality and atmosphere in those albums. I'm not really big on Demonaz's vocals either for this one. It's a lot of, like, incomprehensible, high-pitched shrieking. And I don't know, it just kind of consistently sounds like somebody, like, dying of thirst. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of this record. I didn't really enjoy a single piece of music on this thing. On repeat listens, I found myself kind of nodding off and falling asleep and skipping over, like, good chunks of the record to get to the few slightly less irritating moments. Had Demonaz been more open and willing to working with the musicians he actually brought onto this record, I think this could have been a much more interesting experience. As it stands, though, for me, this is a pretty solid 1.5 out of 5, and I'm tempted to say probably the most I've disliked an Immortal album in some time. All of the reviews I've seen so far for this thing have been overwhelmingly positive, like 4 to 5, 4.5 out of 5 scores across the board, across multiple well-known, reputable websites, blogs, all that stuff. Metal Sucks even said, and I quote, Immortal's War Against All obliterates the haters, which I have to disagree with because I don't really feel obliterated, but alright, pop off, I guess. If you happen to love this record, and if you happen to feel as if this album really does obliterate the haters, more power to you, whatevs. For me, this thing is just ultimately lacking the excitement and intensity that I want from black metal. The issue isn't that they played it safe or that, you know, Demonaz made it all about him. The issue is that they did that, and also the album just isn't very good. In fact, I'd argue it's bad. In fact, also, I just did. 1.5 out of 5. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, join the Discord. Links for all 3 in the description of this video. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.